The moment the driver locked the doors, I felt the air leave my lungs. "You can let us out here," I told him, trying to sound calm. "Our flight is in 1 hour. This drop-off lane is fine." His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "You can't get out here. Trust me. My name is Asha Merrick. I have led multi-million-dollar projects for more than a decade, survived impossible deadlines, impossible clients, and a manager who fears being overshadowed by her own team. But nothing in my life prepared me for a stranger locking me inside his car on the way to the airport. "Sir, please stop the car," I said, my voice thinning. "We need to get out. We can run the rest of the way." He shook his head once, steady and sure. "Please, just trust me." The car accelerated, not wildly, but with purpose, each turn sharper than anything a rideshare driver usually risks near the Seattle airport. My teammates in the back seat kept whispering my name, waiting for me to tell them what to do, but I could barely breathe long enough to think. My fingers curled around the handle. Nothing moved. "Why are you doing this?" I snapped. "My manager said we have 1 hour. Just let us out, and we'll make it." He finally spoke more sharply. "Your flight is boarding in 10 minutes. The words hit like cold water. 10 minutes. That wasn't possible. Linda had looked me directly in the eye that morning and said, "In 1 hour." She said it with the same practiced, condescending ease she used whenever she wanted control. I stared at the locked door, at the driver's tight jaw, at the road rushing beneath us. For a heartbeat, I wondered if I had stepped into the wrong car. If this was one of those stories people whispered about but never believed would happen to them. Then he said quietly, "I am not letting you miss this plane." And just like that, the panic twisted into something sharper, something more dangerous suspicion. 30 minutes earlier, all I did was ask my manager a simple question about our flight. 30 minutes earlier, the day had started with the kind of confusion that makes your stomach tighten before your brain even understands why. I was at my desk, half awake, scrolling through overnight emails, when the airline notification appeared at the top of my screen. "Boarding begins in 30 minutes. I read it twice, then a third time. My manager, Linda Crow, had been in charge of booking every flight for our team's trip to Chicago, the pitch worth several $1,000,000 that our division had been preparing for months. She was the public face. I handled the work beneath it. That was our unspoken agreement. Or rather, her unspoken rule. I stood from my chair and walked to her office. She was leaning back, legs crossed, reviewing the slide deck I spent half the night refining. "Linda," I said, holding up my phone. "The airline email says boarding in 30 minutes. That can't be right." She didn't even look up. "Relax." "Asha, it's in 1 hour. 1 hour." I stepped closer. "The email says it's in 1 hour," she repeated, sharper this time. "Just finish the slides for my section. I need them polished. We cannot afford mistakes today." A knot pulled behind my ribs. Did the airline update the time? Because the message, she finally glanced at me and smiled, thin and patronizing. "Asha." I triple-checked everything. "Trust me." Trust. The same word the taxi driver would use later, the one that made the back of my neck prickle. When I returned to my desk, I refreshed the inbox. The original flight change email was gone. In its place, a gray banner read, "This message has been recalled by the sender." A recall only happens when someone tries to hide a mistake or bury it. I stared at the empty space where that email had been, feeling something shift under my feet. Quiet, but decisive. Linda had looked entirely too comfortable when she told me that lie. By the time our taxi pulled up to the curb at SeaTac, I had repeated Linda's words in my head so many times they almost sounded rational. In 1 hour. Maybe the email had been a glitch. Maybe she really had triple-checked everything. Maybe I was overthinking. Then we stepped inside the terminal. Caleb, one of my analysts, stared at the departures board. "Asha, that's our flight." Right. I followed his gaze. Flight to Chicago. Boarding now. Not in 1 hour. Not even close. That must be a mistake, I said, though the words barely carried weight. Mira pulled up her own confirmation email. My ticket says 10:20. Linda told us 11:20. Why would she tell us that I swallowed hard and tapped Linda's name on my phone, straight to voicemail? I tried again. Same result, Caleb muttered. She said she'd meet us here. She said she had a call with the Chicago office, I reminded him, though I hated how defensive I sounded. Our Slack notifications chimed one after another. Mira read the newest message aloud, her voice tightening. Linda to the leadership channel. Team might have mixed up the schedule, trying to fix it. I'll update soon. My chest went hollow. She posted that already. Caleb exhaled through his teeth. She's covering herself. I scrolled through the channel. Linda had sent 3 messages in 5 minutes, all carefully phrased to imply she had provided the correct schedule and we had ignored it. Mira stepped closer. Asha, did she give you a different time on purpose? I felt heat rise in my face, not from anger, but from the quiet, sinking realization that nothing about this was accidental. The recalled email, her tone in the office, the missing hour. Another Slack message appeared, from Linda, leadership. I'm doing everything I can, hoping the team gets here soon. I closed my phone and steadied my breath. We're not missing this flight. Her story was already moving without us. Now we had to outrun it. We hurried back outside and flagged the nearest taxi. Mira slid in first, then Caleb, and I followed, shutting the door with more force than I meant to. SeaTac departures, I told the driver. As close to the main drop-off as you can. The driver nodded without looking back. Name's Hassan, he said quietly. Flight number Caleb gave it to him, and Hassan tapped it into the small display mounted near his console. His brow tightened. Ma'am, he said. Steady, but direct. This flight is boarding in 10 minutes. I leaned forward. That's not possible. My manager told us 1 hour. Hassan met my eyes in the rearview mirror. The system shows 10 minutes. Mira's voice cracked. Linda wouldn't lie about that. I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Not after the recalled email. Not after the messages she'd sent leadership while we were still fighting airport crowds. We can still make it if you drop us near the terminal. I said, we'll run. Hassan didn't move his hands from the wheel. If I drop you where you're asking, you will not make it. His voice wasn't rude, just certain, like he had already seen the outcome play out. Caleb shifted nervously. Sir, just get us as close as possible. Hassan inhaled slowly, the kind of breath someone takes when deciding whether to argue or proceed. I can take a faster route, but it's not the one you're asking for. I felt Mira glance at me. Asha, what do we do? The mirror caught Hassan's eyes again. There was something in them recognition. Maybe judgment, maybe warning, but it wasn't hostile. We do not have time for mistakes, he said. You want to make that flight. Let me get you there. His certainty pressed against my ribs. I nodded once. Fine. Take your route. Caleb muttered under his breath. I hope we're not gambling the entire project on a taxi driver. I didn't respond. Hassan had already turned sharply onto a lane marked for authorized vehicles only. Traffic tightened the closer we got to the airport. The lanes ahead were clogged, barely moving. My pulse climbed with every passing second. Caleb leaned toward the window, calculating distances under his breath. Mira kept checking the time. We should get out, I said. If we run from here, we might still make it. Caleb nodded quickly. Yeah, just let us out. We'll sprint. I reached for the door handle. It didn't budge. A sharp click echoed through the car as every lock slid down. I spun toward Hassan. Unlock the doors. He didn't raise his voice. You can't get out here. Mira's breath caught. Why are you locking us in? You will never make that flight on foot, he said. Not from this road. That is not your decision. I snapped. Open the doors. Hassan's fingers tightened on the wheel. and his tone shifted, still calm, but cut with a finality that hit me straight in the chest. "Please, just trust me." Caleb reached forward. "Sir, we do not have time for this." "You do not have time to be wrong," Hassan said. And then he jerked the wheel left, slipping us into a narrow lane marked for restricted vehicles. Mira pressed her hand against the window. "How do you even know this route?" Hassan didn't answer. Instead, something small swung from his keyring, a faded badge, the kind worn by private transport staff. I recognized the insignia from the Port of Seattle district, a place where only high-level corporate drivers were cleared. "Where did you get that?" I asked. "From a job that taught me how this city actually moves." He replied, "We are not going the slow way." His turns were too precise, too practiced. He wasn't guessing. He was following a path he had taken many times before. Caleb whispered, "He knows exactly what he's doing." And for the first time since we left the terminal, I felt something colder than fear settle inside me, a realization that Hassan knew this city, this traffic, and somehow us, better than we knew ourselves. Hassan stopped abruptly at a side entrance marked for airport personnel. Before any of us could question him, he was already out of the car, waving over a security officer who approached with recognition in his eyes. "Darcy," the officer said. "Haven't seen you in years. 3 passengers for the Chicago corporate run." Hassan replied, "They need priority." The officer nodded once, motioning us through. No questions. No hesitation. Caleb whispered, "What kind of taxi driver gets greeted like that?" Mira grabbed my wrist. "Just go. Move." We followed the officer through a narrow checkpoint where another guard scanned our IDs without slowing. Hassan stayed behind the barrier, raising a hand. "Run straight to gate C12. Do not stop." We ran. Caleb nearly slipped during the sprint. Mira kept repeating the minutes under her breath, and my lungs burned as the boarding door came into view. A gate agent lifted her hand to close it. "Wait," I shouted. She paused long enough for us to stumble forward, breathless and shaking. She looked at our tickets, sighed, and waved us through. The door sealed behind us with a heavy thunk. We collapsed into our seats, still half in disbelief. Only then did I unlock my phone. The airline email sat at the top, boarding at 10:20. Linda's itinerary, the one she sent our team, read 11:20. Slack lit up with her newest message. "Unfortunately, my team missed the flight. I'll fly alone tomorrow and present on behalf of everyone." Mira covered her mouth. "She already told them." Caleb shook his head slowly. "She wanted this." I stared at Linda's message, my heartbeat finally slowing enough to let anger root itself where fear had been. Her version of the story had already been delivered, and now we were headed straight into the pitch she never expected us to reach. The moment the plane leveled out, I opened my laptop. Mira leaned in beside me, scrolling through her phone. Caleb sat across the aisle, already digging into Slack logs. "I found the recall trace," Mira whispered. "Linda pulled the flight change email at 3 in the morning, Caleb added. "And look at this." She sent the client a trimmed version of the slide deck. "Half our data is missing." My throat tightened. "She wanted them underwhelmed. Or confused," Caleb said. "Either way, it would look like we failed." I kept screenshotting everything: timestamps, message edits, Linda's carefully phrased updates to leadership about us mixing up the schedule. Every click made the betrayal sharper. When we landed in Chicago, a coordinator met us at the gate. "Where's Linda?" he asked. She said she'd arrive separately. Mira's jaw tensed. Plans changed. The conference room felt too bright as we set up. The client executives filed in, glancing at the empty chair where Linda's nameplate sat. One of them asked, "Will she be joining?" I stepped forward before my nerves could win. "No, I'll lead the presentation." Caleb and Mira exchanged a breath, anchoring me. For the next 40 minutes, I walked the room through every detail of our proposed integration supply chain mapping, projected savings, phased rollouts, the technology Linda never bothered to understand. Questions came fast. I answered faster. Their expressions shifted from polite interest to real engagement. By the end, the lead executive stood and shook my hand. This was one of the clearest strategies we've heard all quarter. As we packed up, he added quietly, "I'll be calling your CEO. He should know who carried today." Mira smiled at me. Relieved. Caleb whispered, "We did it." But deep down, I knew Linda wasn't finished, not after the story she had already started spinning. Linda scheduled the debrief for 8 in the morning, less than 12 hours after we landed back in Seattle. She was already sitting at the head of the conference table when I walked in, HR beside her, 2 directors across from them. "Asha," Linda said with a strained smile, "glad you could make it. We were just discussing the challenges from yesterday." Caleb and Mira slipped into seats next to me. Linda folded her hands neatly. "I did everything I could," she began, "but when the team missed the flight, I had to make quick decisions to protect the relationship with our client." I stared at her. "We did not miss the flight." Linda tilted her head. "Asha, we have records showing confusion on your end." "It happens." HR cleared her throat. "Let's stay focused on facts. Facts." I opened my laptop. Here are the emails, the recall traces, the Slack messages she sent leadership before we even reached the gate. I slid the screen toward them. Linda didn't flinch. Timestamps can be edited. Anyone can fake screenshots. Mira bristled. "These aren't faked." Linda cut her off. "Mira, please, let's not escalate this." The directors hovered between us, unsure which way to lean. Linda could sense it. Her confidence sharpened. "Asha has always been emotionally invested," she said softly. "And sometimes that distorts perception. I never intended for her to feel left out. Left out. As if she hadn't tried to remove us entirely." Caleb spoke for the first time. "What about the server logs?" Linda froze. "What logs?" Caleb slid a printed sheet onto the table. I asked aita to verify the message history. "These entries show your edits. Every revision, every deletion." The room changed. HR leaned forward. The directors exchanged a look. Linda opened her mouth. But no words came out. Her story, so carefully constructed, finally cracked under the weight of something she could not rewrite. The directors requested a short recess, but they did not leave the room. HR stepped out to call IT, and within minutes 2 specialists arrived with a tablet and a stack of printed logs. Linda straightened her blazer as if authority alone could steady the ground shifting beneath her. One of the specialists spoke calmly. "We pulled the overnight activity from the mail server. There's a flagged message at 3:07 in the morning." Linda's voice thinned. "I was updating travel details." "That is not unusual." The specialist slid the tablet toward the directors. "This is the unedited version of the message you attempted to recall." Every eye turned to the screen. The text was short, written in Linda's clipped tone. "Gate change confirmed. Flight 1020. If they miss it, I will handle the pitch myself." Mira inhaled sharply. Caleb whispered something under his breath. I felt the breath leave my chest, quiet and final. Linda's face drained of color. "That is taken out of context. I was outlining contingencies." Ait shook his head. "The recall was initiated 3 minutes later, and you modified 2 additional versions afterward." The door opened again, and everyone turned as the CEO walked in. Beside him stood Hassan, wearing the same steady expression he had the day he drove us to the airport. "Hassan called me yesterday," the CEO said, stepping forward. "He recognized your team was in trouble. He used to drive for my logistics division years ago, and he knows chaos when he sees it." Linda's gaze snapped to him. "You brought a taxi driver into this meeting." The CEO didn't blink. "I brought a witness." And IT brought the truth. HR typed something on her tablet, then looked up. "Linda, your system access has been disabled. You'll step out with me now." Linda rose slowly, her hands trembling as she gathered her things. The story she had built, protected, and weaponized had finally collapsed in front of every person she hoped to impress. Linda didn't argue as HR guided her toward the hallway. There was no shouting, no dramatic outburst, just the quiet scrape of her chair and the sound of her heels fading down the corridor. For months, she had controlled the narrative, shaping every story to place herself at the center. Now, the silence around her exit felt heavier than any accusation. The CEO waited until the door closed behind her before he turned to me. "Asha, stay a moment." Caleb and Mira exchanged a look, then slipped out, giving me a small nod as they left. I stood across from the CEO, my pulse still uneven. "I never wanted this to become a spectacle," I said softly. "It didn't," he replied. "It became a reckoning." I looked down at my hands. If she had succeeded, we would have lost the contract, maybe more. And yet you held it together. He pulled out a chair. "Sit." I did. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I am not giving you a new title today." The words should have stung, but his tone was too deliberate to mistake for dismissal. "I am giving you structure," he continued. "I want you to help rebuild the project leadership model. Choose how responsibilities are divided. Create the system you wish you had. No shortcuts. No shadows." I stared at him, startled. "You want me to design the framework?" "Yes. You have insight that no organizational chart could ever teach." He stood. "You earned that through the way you led when no one was watching." When I stepped outside, Hassan was waiting near the entrance, hands in his pockets, that same steady look in his eyes. "You knew something was wrong," I said. He smiled faintly. "Sometimes the locked door is the only way to push someone forward." The words settled into me, deeper than I expected. That locked taxi door, once terrifying, once suffocating, had broken open a future I hadn't dared imagine. And I finally walked toward it without hesitation.